Hello, how are you today? We have with us André Carreiro. André is the senior scientist for the Intelligent Systems Department at Fraunhofer, and the theme that we will discuss today is artificial intelligence from AI to real life concerns. So, André. Artificial intelligence has become a quite hyped term. So it started as an idea. Now it's getting into our lives, and it continues to generate very polarized opinions about its real contribution for the improvement of our quality of life. Why do you believe that this is still happening?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for this opportunity. It's very interesting to have this kind of conversation on what AI can bring and should bring and must bring to our everyday lives. So to your first question, I think it's still very polarized, mostly because of most people being unaware of that every day they use something that has AI behind it. So in your pocket, you have probably a smartphone that has a lot of applications that run with AI behind it. So even your camera, when you take a snapshot of something, it already has some AI to focus automatically, to do some filters. When you apply funny filters, there's a lot of AI going on. When you go do a Google search, it already has lots of AI. So one thing is that we usually take these things for granted and we don't know what's happening under the hood. And so when we think about AI, we think usually about evil robots and that stuff that we see on sci-fi movies that always ends with human subjugation to the machine. So this also instills some fear in people that are not that comfortable with the concept of machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and neural networks. And there are really a plethora of terms that are used interchangeably, but even that is worth clearing up. So we have this big umbrella, which is artificial intelligence, where we want to mimic anything that can imitate human intelligence, okay? But you can have a robot that is programmed to walk around Mars, for example, or even in the moon, like decades ago, that uses AI, but it does not learn by itself, okay? So now the rover in Mars has a lot of machine learning, but AI is, you can program AI with specific rules. Okay, then there's another concept which falls under the concept, the broader AI concept, which is machine learning. In that you are teaching machines. So machine learn by example. So these are dogs. You show them pictures of dogs and cats, and then the machine learns how to distinguish them best. And so there's a lot of work involved here. And then within machine learning family, we have a specific type of algorithm or models, which are the neural networks, which are all the hype right now. Okay, they are very complex and not very interpretable. And so there are also a lot of work on making these networks more explainable and more interpretable to reduce some risks associated with their application. And so I guess to sum up this first question is, it's still polarizing, and I think mostly because we still have to educate people, everyday people, to know what AI is on by design and by definition, and to show them that there's a lot of benefits to reap from it. Of course, there's a potential of some bad things, as with all technology throughout these centuries, even the first industrial revolution. Of course, there are always bad things that we can do with it, but I guess the benefits highly surpass the dangers. And so we have to discuss this and bring this to the everyday discussion.
Picking on what you were just saying, Andre, do you believe that that's why many people call for certification, for regulation around this topic of AI?
Yes, I was mentioning some everyday applications, but of course it's not too dangerous if I search something on Google and the answer comes a bit biased or something. Of course, you may say that that may be some manipulation on how you search and how you find things, but it's more critical when you are talking about healthcare, for example, or aviation in space, or the banking system and getting a credit approved. Of course, these questions are highly sensitive. Okay, and so I want to be sure that the model at least is not doing worse for the prospective client or user than a human would. And hopefully we want to be better because we know humans are biased, and so we make mistakes and we make judgment and error judgments. And hopefully we want the model to overcome these human biases. But as we used to say in the media, data is biased and not the algorithms. Okay, so we are training something and they learn from data, and real world has some biases, and so there has to be a significant and responsible use of data and curation of data that you use to train to avoid to falling on some of these pitfalls. And one thing that I think Europe is striving to do is this sort of more compliant AI. Okay, we want to make sure that we go step by step in a more sure way, more safe way, compared to, for example, the US and China, which are almost always concerned with performance and getting ahead of the curve. And so there's something here about the tortoise and the hare, where Europe could be the tortoise, but we could be going slower but steadier. Okay, and I agree with this point of view. And actually, certification of AI is still not possible. And actually, Fraunhofer is building a project on it to build a platform to allow for this type of certification. Because what happens today in AI products, and for example, with application in healthcare, is that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, comes, evaluates an algorithm or a model, and if the developers want to build a 2.0 version, they have to go through the process all over again. And so we want to make this a more dynamic process to stimulate the development and the continuously and dynamic compliance of this sort of products to evolving regulation. For example, we know that these AI products are not the same today that will be tomorrow, and so even the certification process and what helps, like the underlying platforms, should also be able to handle this dynamics.
What about research and development in the field of artificial intelligence? How do you think that R&D is currently looking to overcome the challenges associated to AI?
Okay, so there are a lot of challenges, and they are being addressed in different ways. So one thing that, for example, at ICOS we are doing with this certification-based product is actually to build a set of tools or modules that developers can use to assess, for example, if the data that you are using the model is similar or the same that was used for training. And so you can see that if there are some deviations, and this can be done uh, automatically. For example, you can detect some biases. You can detect if there's some miscompliance with GDPR. Okay, so you can check, for example, if there's human faces that should be masked and are not. So there are a lot of research. For example, there's a research line that is fairly recent, which is explainable AI or XI, that focuses solely on making models that are increasingly performant, but more obscure and more like black boxes, and to make these as transparent as possible, as interpretable, that we can, okay, the model made this decision because of this and this. Okay, so we want to reach a stage that the model is as transparent as possible to help us make a decision. And this decision could be as critical as providing a diagnosis in the medical field, or to hit the brakes in a self-driving car. Okay.
So, what sectors you have enumerated some examples of fields where AI is already changing how things are done. What sectors can you see immediately benefiting from AI at a time when so many paradigms are being changed at a very fast pace?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to pinpoint exactly one or a few sectors, because virtually every domain is affected or is going to be affected in a short term by AI. Okay, so we can go from critical areas such as I mentioned, from healthcare, security, cybersecurity, even to entertainment and sports. Every domain from one spectrum to the other is being affected, and with significant gains from AI products. So if we think, for example, with Industry 4.0, where we have many sensors gathering data, and so we have huge amounts of data being generated and collected, we know that we can extract some value from it using AI. And so many industries and manufacturing are finally making use of this deluge of data by applying models, for example, to predict when the machines should be pieces should be replaced, or someone should check up on the machines. And similarly, we can do analogy for healthcare. Okay, we can know, for example, when a person will have, so for example, a person undergoes a surgery, and we know the probability of a recidive or being resident in the in being hospitalized again, for example. We know even there are some areas where, until key requirements are fulfilled, like aviation and space, because there are a lot of regulations. So AI has been applied in more specific tasks, but even so, they are being applied with good results. And so as we move forward with this safe AI or responsible AI, we can reap more benefits in these more critical areas. But I would say that virtually every domain is gonna have some clear gains from it.
Specialists are, of course, quite at ease with what can be the effects and the benefits that we can reap from AI. However, the let's call regular Joe, they may be sometimes worried or at least fearsome about some of the consequences of AI. What do you wish that non-specialists knew about artificial intelligence?
Okay, so I introduced a bit of this in the beginning. So at least having a notion on how far can AI go or cannot go. Okay, so because we have two types of people. So some types of people are very skeptical, and so they say, okay, this is just this will not work, or at least it won't work with my data. And then on the other end, we have, okay, this is magic, and will solve all my problems. Okay, and we have to be in the middle. And so more important than know what AI is capable of is knowing its limitations, because AI in the end is just math. So it's just multiplications and summations and stuff working on behind to get you some level of return. So for example, if you want to increase your production cost because you have some lower downtimes, because you can predict when the machine should be replaced, there's a whole story that you have to follow. Okay, what data do I need to solve this? What types of models do I need to run this in the cloud? Do I need to run this privately? Do I need to run this on the mobile? So there are a lot of sets of decisions that are not always the developer responsibility. Okay, so the decision makers also have to be aware of this of the impact of different choices. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that different levels of decision makers should also be involved in the process of developing AI, and of course the end user. So if you work in a factory, you should not be afraid of being replaced by an intelligent machine. At most, what the machine will do are the most repetitive tasks that we usually don't like to do anyway. So what I feel what will happen is that humans will be more free to explore other more creative and critical tasks like in mentoring human relationships, because I envision, and especially in critical domains, that there will always be what we call a human in the loop. Okay, there will always be a human right there to validate the model's decision, to impart some of its own knowledge, to guide the machine in the learning process. Okay, so the tasks of the human tasks will get more interesting and not reduced. Okay, so there will be other roles that will be born instead of eliminated. Okay, we will change the way we do things, but most people will not get out of a job. So we have to reinvent some roles, but I would not fear that everyone will get out of a job, especially the most interesting ones.
Well, Andre, sorry. Thank you so much for bringing us here today some perspectives about how AI will change and is already changing our lives for the better. Today we had with us André Carreiro, senior scientist for the Intelligent Systems Department at Fraunhofer, who brought us some aspects of real life concerns that come from artificial intelligence, and that very efficiently dissipated those concerns. Thank you so much, and we hope that you can join us for the next Talknology.
Thank you.